the recording of this webinar will be available on Link's website and our YouTube channel. Just a few tips about using Webex. If you lose your internet connection, don't panic. You can just reconnect using the link I mailed you. And also, again, if you have any other issues, you can send me a message on the chat box on the right-hand side of the menu. If you want to test your audio options, you have the audio on the top menu. You can just click there and speaker microphone audio test. All of you will be muted automatically, so we avoid background noise. But if you'd like to ask any questions at the end, you can just unmute yourselves by clicking on the red button by your names. So today you're featuring, and we're very happy to be featuring on this webinar, and Helena Monteiro, she's WIC's Executive Director, and Sevdelina Rukanova, and Senior Officer at the European Foundation Center, Carolina Misk from UNDP, the Program Analyst, and Batio Misika, Deputy Head of the OECD netFWD, and Don Chen from the Forward Foundation, Senior Program Officer. They'll be speaking in this order. And if you have any questions between presentations, please do send them on the chat box, and then they'll be addressed at the end of our webinar, the Q&A session. So I'm passing the word to Helena Monteiro. Helena?
Thank you, Anna. Is this going to give us the overview of Wings as well, or that is already done? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so if there is some new members, Wings is a global network of grantmaker networks or grantmakers associations and support organizations serving philanthropy. And we have about 140 network participants in over 50 countries. Our mission is to strengthen, to promote, and to provide leadership on the development of philanthropy and private social investment worldwide. We have been very happily working with UNDP. Well, we started conversations in 2011, but since 2013, earlier this year, we were able to establish a very fruitful collaboration with UNDP, which some Wings members decided also to join in a very active role, that is to say OECD, netFWD, EFC, and some other members of Wings. We have been discussing earlier this year on how to promote collaboration and to advance the global development agenda by bringing together for discussion the world of philanthropy, that is the world of foundations, of grant makers, of private social investors, non-profit, and multilateral organizations such as the United Nations. So we had the first meeting, which was very interesting, in April 2013 and took place in New York at the headquarters of the UN. And it was an interesting sight to see the world of foundations and philanthropy coming to join, the world of multilaterals to discuss, joint interests and possibilities for collaboration towards working on development goals. And then we had a second meeting in September, also in New York, this time hosted by the foundation sector, by the Forward Foundation, where we're able to look more specifically at how, leaders from foundations, from governments and multilateral organizations, and from civil society organizations can best collaborate to advance the global development agenda, especially not only in helping in building this new global development agenda, looking at post-2015 development goals, but also exploring strategies for engagement and cooperation in this process. So I'll ask now, without taking much more of your time, to continue with the program, to ask the Wings members to continue and to share their views on how we carried our discussions. So I hear that Sevdalina is just coming in. Is that it, Anna? Yes.
And
Should we change the order?
Yeah, so Sevdalina is just joining us. So
Okay.
if Carolina doesn't mind, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, very good, I'm ready.
And Carolina, hi, yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Very good. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Wins and other colleagues, for inviting us to this to the webinar today. It's very exciting for us, and not just the webinar today, but obviously our very good relationship with Wins and the conversation, the broader dialogue that we have between UN development system and philanthropy about development. And what I will talk for the next 10 minutes is to present broadly what have been the Millennium Development Goals, the International Development Goals. Also, again, the concept that a lot of this is changing because there is an ongoing discourse about what should be the global development after 2015 when the MDG expires. And I will also speak about how we are involving philanthropic foundations into this conversation and collaboration, both at the headquarters, at the global level, and also at countries. And just a quick question to Anna. Anna, how can I change the slide?
Sure, you can just click on the arrows at the top on the number.
Oh, very good, sorry.
That's okay. Carolina?
Yes, I'm trying to change the slide with an arrow.
Oh, no, it's just by the number 1.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Oh, yes.
Apologies for this, please. And so the Millennium Development Goals have been what we call among the international development practitioners the common vision for meeting the needs of the world's poor. So the Millennium Development Goals have been the most comprehensive so far at the international level agreement between governments about how to fight the global poverty. And they have been encapsulated in these 8 measurable and time-bound development goals. The Secretary General, for example, says that the Millennium Development Goals have been the biggest anti-poverty push in the history of humanity. And indeed, there have been a lot of successes with the Millennium Development Goals. And just before I go into statistical data, which is very important, obviously as development practitioners here at the UN, for us, the Millennium Development Goals have been the overarching framework and vision on how the UN should work with governments and also other partners in countries to address issues of poverty and development and progress. However, they are absolutely not encompassing. There is development that exists outside of the Millennium Development Goals. However, from our perspective, we as the UN and also together with the government and our partners, we are trying to emphasize that there is an importance to rally international community behind these most important targets. And since 2000, when they were achieved, they have been since they were set and agreed by the heads of the states, of the countries, there have been some successes and also some delays. There are MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, where we as an international community have been on track. For example, like fighting the extreme poverty. This goal, according to the World Bank, has been actually met in 2010, where we have, as an international community, we have achieved of addressing the 50%, fighting the extreme poverty at the 50% of the target, which was set in 1990. And you can see the way to read this graph, the best way is to see how much green there is. So the MDG 1 is the big success. Also, the ratio of kids enrollment to school has been very high. The third one, where we, as a community, we have achieved big success, has been access to safe drinking water. But there have been MDGs which have been very much off track, and there are two which are at the critically low levels, which is the under 5 child mortality and also the maternal health. And although the MDGs, the way that we measure them at the UN is at the international level, the countries individually can measure them at their national levels as well. So what you can see here on this slide number 4 is that there are what are the examples of countries that have been the top achievers, both at the absolute progress level and also relative to the MDG target. So in general, there have been huge successes in Southeast Asia and Latin America, but the continent that overall lags behind has been Africa. And at the UN, obviously, we are very committed to do whatever we can to make progress on the MDGs before 2015. And we have to that end identified as the Common Development System family an approach which is called an accelerated action towards the MDGs, where we are looking into what are the key obstacles on the way of achieving the MDGs. And countries can select a concrete one MDG or 2 or 3, however they want, and they can look at the bottlenecks and see how can they work together to address this specific shortcomings. So the idea is really to mobilize support at the country level and together with the international assistance to make sure that there is a progress made towards that specific goal. And right now we have 50 countries which are 50 governments which are implementing the accelerated action plan. And in some of these countries, we are, as the UN, working very closely with the private sector and philanthropic foundations. So this last 15 years has given us very good lessons learned and evidence on what have been the strengths and weaknesses of the MDGs. And the fact that probably the most important has been that the MDGs, as I mentioned before, has rallied the international community for that common vision, and that it was time-bound and measurable. However, thinking about the new development agenda, we need to take into account the weaknesses that the system has had, and there have been many. The MDGs definitely neglected the poorest and the most vulnerable, because the way that has been taken is at the aggregate national level, which is then again aggregated at the international level. So the issues of social justice and inequalities have not been, as well as human rights, have not been taken into account. There was a lot of imbalance and pressure towards developing countries because the measurements have been mostly on the achieving of the MDGs and not so much on the international assistance. And for example, another one which has been very important is that within this statistical data gathering, we have actually neglected important evidence that poverty today and in the years to come will actually very much be concentrated in the fragile countries. So where are we today? What we're discussing? What is the conversation about the global development post-2015? And at the last General Assembly, the government agreed that the new framework should address fighting the international poverty, but at the same time, very important that we should take into account these other important frameworks, which is the environmental sustainability, as well as fighting inequality, social justice, and human rights. And in the global discourse about what should be the new development agenda. For the first time ever, we have, as the UN, reached out and asked people around the world what are their views about the development needs. And to this end, we have, as the UN, jointly with our partners, have had this very comprehensive global consultations that were actually have been carried out because they're still ongoing at the 3 levels of the country consultation. So we had discussions in 88 countries, 11 thematic. And we've had a web platform where we invite people's views on what they think are important development priorities. And this process has been, as I mentioned, been led by the UN, but in a very close participation from the civil society, government, the private sector. And overall, so far, we've had the statistics that 1.3 million people participated. So what have been the key messages that we've had from the people around the world? And very important that we actually we've had from the people from both global south as well as the global north. So the key messages can actually bundle around 3 areas. That we need to finish the unfinished business of the MDGs. We want to continue fighting the poverty, the extreme poverty, because there is more that we need to do on that aspect, especially with access to basic services such as water, food, healthcare, and quality education. And what has been very important and amplified by people is the issue of security, job creation, as well as the transparent management of natural resources. And finally, very important, what we really need to address is to fight inequality at both the global level as well as the international. People want to participate in political processes. They want their voices to be heard. And that's another very important message that has been there. And what are the next steps? So how does this political process look like? Obviously, very important that the new global development agenda that will kick into on the 1st of January 2016 will be agreed by the national government. And we know that this will be supported, and even though we know that the agreement will come from the government, the realization of the agenda will be done in a broad-based multi-stakeholder partnership, because we all know, the government as well as all the other partners, that the sustainable development cannot be achieved without all the parties working together. So we are working very hard in discussing about how the new global partnerships look like. Currently, the government has passed and set up something which is called the Open Working Group that encompasses about 80 governments working together to define these new, what we call sustainable development goals. And the reason why we call them sustainable is obviously because the agenda of sustainability will be very much highly addressed in the new set of targets. The Open Working Group at the moment invites consultations from various parties, including from the foundation. So between now and the end of February, when they finish their work, there are 3 sessions that will be carried out. And there are specific slots where, for example, Philanthropic foundations can share their views. And in parallel, UNDP and UN Development System as such, we have been very involved into the next phase of the consultation, which is about how to. And finally, we are thinking and we are discussing with the government on how to prototype these solutions. At UNDP, we have had these conversations with foundations ongoing since the beginning of the year, and here you can see our key partners in this. The main objective of the conversation is really to mobilize philanthropic leaders to engage in the conversation about the development, global development. And at UNDP, we are very keen to reach out to the emerging philanthropy from the global south. We would like to deepen the collaboration between the multilaterals and foundations. Very important for us is to build on the comparative strength. And even though foundations are not new to the UN system, there is a lot of effort that needs to be done to coordinate our efforts and also better understand what are our comparative advantages. Because what we recognize is that there is definitely a mutual interest to move away from this typical donor-grantee relationship to partnerships. And we need to move towards the broad-based alliances. But there is still a lot of conversation that we need to undertake to understand what is it and how we can arrive in a real partnership. And finally, we are, as UNDP and the UN system, we are open to new and innovative partnerships, pioneering approaches to data and rigorous accountability mechanisms. And this is really the vision of the new global partnership that we would like to push forward, and that's what we are trying to steer our relationship towards. So thank you very much for your for listening. And the final slide is really for you to see what are the key actors that have been very much involved in this discussion on the post-2015. This is a slide which is also available on the website in a more interactive manner. Thank you very much, Anna. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for the great introduction or overview on the issue. And we now are glad to have with us Delina from the European Foundation Center.
Hello, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, I'm really sorry for being a few minutes late. I had some IT issues, so apologies for missing the first couple of minutes. So shall I just go ahead, Anna?
Sure, yes, please.
Yeah. Basically, I will try just in a couple of minutes to highlight some of the ways in which the European Foundation Center is trying to engage around this global agenda, particularly the ways in which we are trying to support our members and also develop our own understanding and capacity to be part of this global conversation. So as a way of short introduction, the European Foundation Center is an international association of public benefit foundations and corporate funders. We have over 230 members, primarily from Europe, but also from the United States, Latin America, the Middle East, and international philanthropy is and has always been a very important dimension of our work. What has changed since this year is that the board of the FC last year gave a green light for us to establish a small unit focusing on philanthropy and development as a key service within the EFC, and this will be a priority area for us in the coming years. So what we would like to do with this is to become much more systematic about building our understanding of what our membership and the wider foundation sector is doing in the development field and around global issues. We're also seeking to build strategic relations with multilateral organizations and official donors, as well as key civil society networks around global issues and the development agenda, and to create, to start developing different types of fora where conversations among these different actors can happen on a more regular basis. And the third area of priority for this international department is to advance a more favorable environment for cross-border philanthropy, and to work also in partnership with philanthropy support organizations and civil society organizations in other parts of the world to address some challenges philanthropy is facing as it operates in a global context. So going more specifically to the work related to the post-2015 process, during the last year in particular, we have invested more time in building relationships with UN, the World Bank, and also the EU institutions, particularly the directorates dealing with development and the foreign policy areas, and one of our most recent strategic engagements is also with OECD netFWD, of which I think we will hear a little bit more later on. So on the one hand, we are seeking to understand the roles these different actors play, and also as we move forward to identify strategic opportunities for conversation, but also increasingly seeking to understand where and how we can enable connections between foundations and different types of development actors, also closer to the ground at the region and country level, or around specific thematic areas. And on the vis-a-vis our members, the members of the European Foundation Centre, we are building up a series of efforts that are aimed at communicating to our membership more systematically about these processes, who are the key actors, and why and how foundations can contribute to the discussions on the global development agenda. One of the concrete examples is a conversation we convened recently within the initiative called Funders Forum on Sustainable Cities, on what is at stake with respect to urban sustainability in the global development agenda, what are the kind of mobilization and advocacy efforts driven by civil society actors, and also what does the timeline and the key entry points for foundations look like. A key question coming out of this is also considering the fact that a lot of foundations are working primarily at the local level, what kind of role can the Funders Forum play to enable the foundations that work at the local level to have a better understanding of what is happening at the global level, why this is important, how it impacts on the local level, and how a feedback loop can be established. Also, how foundations can engage, even if they're primarily active at the local level. And one of the immediate follow-up actions to this will be a first more in-depth webinar on the current state of play, just in about 10 days' time. We're actually right now preparing the sending of the invitations, and we're envisaging a series of follow-up conversations next year as around the urban sustainability dimension within the global development agenda discussions during 2014 and 2015 in the run-up to the General Assembly in September 2015. So this is just one concrete example. In parallel with that, for next year, we're now establishing a calendar of similar type of activities, webinars, as well as some face-to-face meetings that will look at other dimensions within the post-2015 process, where we have already established clusters of members working on this agenda, and where they're beginning to express an interest to actually understand what the state of play is and how they can make meaningful contribution around these processes, either through the support they provide to civil society organizations, or potentially also very much through their convening role. I will leave it at that. I think, but Till will talk more about another effort which we have agreed to join, which is linked to the Global Partnership on development effectiveness, but we can talk about that together later on once she has spoken.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Sevdelina. It was great to hear about EFC's efforts towards building connections among the different actors in foundations and development, and how foundations shouldn't think that if they're just at the local level, they can't play a role still in the issue. Thank you so much. And Batil, turn it to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can help.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Batil Misika. I'm the head of the OECD network of foundations working for development. For those of you who haven't, that we haven't had a chance to have a discussion with yet, we are a new network of about 20 foundations and a dozen associates with our networks of foundations, and we have a few of them with us.
Batil, I think we lost you. Hi, Batil. Can you hear us?
And it seems that Batil is gone, probably due to the internet connection. Maybe we should now. We go ahead with the program or collect comments from the audience, waiting if Batil will be able to restart her connection.
Sure. So, if you have any questions or comments before Batil continues her presentation, please just unmute yourselves by clicking on the red button and by your names, or do send us a message and on the chat box that's on the right-hand side of the screen. Maybe, and Sevdalina, since you have joined the OECD network and the efforts, could you maybe go over a little bit about the effort before and Batil continues?
Hello. OECD Net Forward, I'm not going to talk so much about the network. I hope Batil will be able to join us. I can say a few words about this exploratory exercise that OECD Net Forward is coordinating to see if we can come up with a set of concrete and very practical guidelines on the big question of the how within the framework of the Global Partnership for Development Effectiveness, foundations and other development stakeholders can engage more effectively with one another. The key question we are all asking ourselves is, what will it take in terms of... Oh, there it is. Batil is there, so I'll let her talk about it.
Hello? Hi, Batil. And Sevdalina was just talking a little bit about your... Hello?
We can hear you, Batil. Batil, we can hear you. You can't hear us? Yes, we can hear you, Batil.
You can probably hear me, but I can't hear anything.
Batil, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, and you can continue.
Hello? Hello?
Sevdalina, and I think Batil is still having issues, so if you could continue, please. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so the aim of this exercise we're undertaking is to see if we can come up with a set of very practical guidelines or recommendations on what kind of process...
Hello?
Can you hear us, Batil? So I'll just finish the sentence. What kind of process and what kind of spaces need to be put in place in order for us over the coming years to see a more productive and more systematic and effective relationship between foundations and other development actors? And what we also discussed is that we see the need for strengthening this relationship around just getting to know one another. That's a dialogue level, a level which is much more around knowledge and practice and evidence sharing. And the third level is around practical collaboration. And the organizations participating in this discussion are OECD, netFWD, UNDP, WINGS, and the European Foundation Center at the moment, and several of the OECD and netFWD members are very closely involved in this.
Magdalena, thank you so much. I really appreciate you filling in. I know how hard it is for us to speak on the space or on the voice of our partners. I know this is not an easy task.
Hello, can you hear me?
I appreciate you collaborating. Yes, now we can hear you. We are able to hear you all the time, and that you can't hear us.
Yeah, I couldn't. You couldn't hear me, and then I lost you. Yeah. I'm so sorry. This is the joys of technology.
So Anna, kindly asked, and Magdalena agreed to fill in for you, and she mentioned, the partners of this collaboration, and the work on the principles, but just in general sense. So if you want to take a few minutes to finalize your points, and we can continue with our agenda.
Sure.
It's quite difficult, I know, but that's one of the challenges of having this global online meeting.
Sure. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
Okay. So about the principles, but actually the principles have come about because we have come to a point when the role of foundations in post-2015 is no longer do they have a role, but what role do they have, where and how can they contribute to this agenda, as Carolina and Sevdelina said. So this is what we were asked to coordinate, and these principles are asking what can we do differently as the philanthropic sector to have more impact, and how can we better structure and incentivize our engagement as philanthropic actors in order to contribute in the best possible way to the post-2015 agenda and to the agenda on aid effectiveness that is about to be discussed at the ministerial level in Mexico in April. So we were asked by ministers coordinating this effort to present a set of guidelines or principles, which we are discussing now. It's starting. The idea is really how can we localize this agenda? This is what we're all saying. So at the local level, this is really where we see the challenge, because we are going to have more of these conversations at the global level, and we will continue to do so, because that's the way to mobilize and have other actors recognize the value added of foundations, which are much more than a provider of funds. But locally, how do we walk the talk? So I think the principles have now to be taken also to the local level. We've been exploring possibilities to discuss them, for example, in Africa with the Elumelu Foundation in Nigeria. So we will confirm whether these consultations can take place. And we're working with networks that are members of WINGS, like AGN, to actually get feedback from the ones implementing philanthropic engagement day in and day out. So I think now it would be best maybe to have Don tell us how the Ford Foundation sees how this plays out at the local level. But from our side, we would be very happy to have a follow-up conversation on how we can engage you more in shaping the guideline and seeing how it can be most useful to operationalize what we've been talking about.
Thank you very much, Bethel. This is very useful. And before we go to Dawn, I just would like to remember everyone that we would have time and space to continue this discussion at WING Forum, which would be a great time and opportunity to look at, how to bring this local and also to get more feedback on the principles. And so Dawn, to you now.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, very good. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this webinar. And I'm just delighted to work with these colleagues who are on the phone presenting with me. The Ford Foundation has been in existence for 77 years. We have 4 goals to our mission. They are to strengthen democratic values, to reduce poverty and injustice, to promote international cooperation, and to advance human achievement. And the shorthand of all of these 4 goals is to say that we're a social justice foundation. I came to this work primarily through my support of inclusive and sustainable cities, because I lead the Just Cities initiative at the foundation. But the foundation more broadly is also engaged in a variety of other issues, such as gender equality, sexual and reproductive health and rights, community rights over natural resources, indigenous peoples, those types of things. And so we regard the MDGs as a critically important process, and the fact that they are now blending with the SDGs and will be called the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, is very significant. I really agree with a lot of the strengths and weaknesses and the analysis that Carolina from UNDP provided. And one area of weakness that we're particularly interested in addressing is that of inequality, which is actually quite interesting for us because, as I mentioned, the Ford Foundation was founded with the mission of poverty reduction, but I think as we have evolved over the several decades of our existence, we recognize that inequality is also a major driving force behind many of the problems that we see today, and you have to address inequality in order to achieve justice, and so that has been a main focus for us, and again, within my work, within the urban development context. Now, I wanted to just touch base on a couple of things. One thing being the coordination of foundations and the effort to really try to get more foundations interested in this post-2015 process, which of course includes getting them informed about this process, because I have found that there aren't that many foundations that are very well versed in this process, and slowly that's beginning to change. And I think that now that it's become more clear that the Sustainable Development Goals are looking a little more concrete, then I think more foundations recognize that they have a stake in these issues as well. And so I would say our involvement has gone back to the preparation for the Rio +20 conference, which we knew was going to be a bit of a forerunner to the post-2015 process. And I'm also delighted to say that I've been a participant and enthusiastic one in the Funders Forum for Sustainable Cities. I think it serves a very useful role in, again, informing and offering opportunities for learning among foundations that want to better understand how the potential for a sustainable cities goal or urbanization goal within the Sustainable Development Goals might affect their work. So that's been really critical. I'm also very interested in what the deal has mentioned in terms of a dialogue among foundations regarding development effectiveness and the identification of some guidelines and principles to help determine how foundations can really engage in that process. And of course, our partners at the UN are very critical, as are the broader foundation members that are actively engaged with WINGS. And so we're very excited to be part of this dialogue. In terms of, so the second thing I want to mention is, we care very much about how these issues hit the ground. These goals tend to be very, they're at the national level. And when we really work in various places, we tend to pay very close attention to how lofty goals like these affect communities at the very household level, very local level. One example that I'll cite is that I do think the MDGs have been very important for setting high goals. And again, I turn to Carolina's analysis of this. It's been very effective to have time-bound commitments, very specific, measurable, observable commitments. At the same time, the implementation is a challenge. We've seen in some countries, for example, that are trying to achieve the goal of slum reduction or the improvement of people's lives in slum conditions, that being interpreted as a goal of slum eradication. And so a number of countries and cities have fought to eliminate slums and have done so in a manner that does not respect people's rights who might be living in slums within cities. Lots of slums and informal settlements have been bulldozed and removed, and there have been a series of forced evictions that some say have been related to the Millennium Development Goals and the attempts to achieve them. On the other hand, there's no denying that the MDGs have also focused attention on trying to improve the quality of life in informal settlements as well. So I think more attention paid to how these goals get implemented is going to be critically important. And so we are committed to really drawing those connections between goals and implementation. The last thing I'll note is that there are a set of different stakeholders who are trying to really work on the urban set of goals. In particular, there's a coalition that's comprised of UN Habitat and ICLEI and NRD4SG and others that are actively promoting the creation of an urban goal within the SDGs. I believe there are others that are also pushing for that. I heard that UNDP was also considering that as well. Whatever the goals may be, I think it's critically important to, for the hard work to be done to identify not only the political strategy for getting goals established, but also the technical and quantitative role in identifying the evidence and the metrics and the measures that will form the targets. Because whether there's a goal or not, there's going to be a very strong need to have targets that are very well defined and measurable, so that national governments and local governments have a better sense of how to really address those targets and goals. So we're committed to this area of work, and it's my hope that in the coming months we'll have additional participants from the Ford Foundation who are getting involved, and also more participants from the other foundations that we work with. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Don. And thank you to our other presenters as well, Batil, Carolina, and Sevdelina. And it was great to have the overview, the UNDP point and the MDGs, and how we can all help actually achieve MDGs. And we're all looking into how to implement changes in practical issues and practical points. And it's a very good point, Don, about how to measure these issues. Because as Carolina mentioned, data is very important too, and having information so we can act on those issues. So now we have a few minutes for questions. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself again, or send those questions over the chat box on the right-hand side. And meanwhile, Batil, could you talk a little bit more about the principles you mentioned and how they can help actually get foundations more into and the development goals and helping achieve the development goals.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we identified so far 3 pillars. One is about dialogue, another one is about data, and the third one is about enhanced and innovative collective engagement. So we think that unearthing the how behind these principles is really what's going to allow us to walk the talk on the new agenda. Just to give you an example, on the need to dialogue, we have identified a number of issues which were mentioned by Dan. For example, there's a problem of communication. There's a problem of the foundations not feeling integrated into these discussions, while we need to identify ways in which we can bridge dialogue at the local level. Not everybody needs to be in New York. So we're thinking this can contribute to the local agenda by identifying the issues which actually are to be discussed at the local level. Not everything needs to be discussed in every country. Now, on data and accountability, this is something that organizations like WINGS and the EFC and others have been working on for a very long time. Now there's a call for a data revolution. That's something that concerns each and every foundation. There needs to be efforts on both the sharing of data. This is something that's done at the global level, both by IATI, the OECD DAC, which is collecting figures on philanthropic flows, but as well at the local level. There are many organizations trying to capture these flows, and this is important because that's the core of accountability. If you are to provide funds to a partner government, they have to know how much, into what sector, and to what partners, so that they can maybe reorientate these funds into matching their priorities. And then on our innovative collective engagement, there are already a lot of ongoing, very successful collaborative initiatives on the ground. Just to name a few, the Better Than Cash Alliance is operational in several countries, and it brings together governments, donor agencies like USAID, the private sector like Citigroup, foundations like MasterCard or Visa, and these efforts can be replicated. And the innovation behind it, which is to come and promote financial inclusion through different ways, through promoting digital payments, especially in the administration, are some lessons that can be replicated, or the Digital Jobs Africa initiative of the Rockefeller Foundation. So I think what we will have to do will be to fine-tune these guidelines, that it can be as operational as possible, but to also find some concrete country applications for them. And what we're hoping to do is to get political commitment in Mexico from 2 or 3 governments that will then take these discussions on the ground, where they will lead and they own the agenda. So we think that's in the spirit of the Paris Declaration as well, and will be done in collaboration with foundations that are willing to support this agenda. And we see our role, as Don said, as brokers and conveners and enablers of dialogue. So the more foundations we can convene and broker around these discussions, the better. And we will try to make sure that the variety of views is represented.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bachil. It was a great review on the principles and the importance of data and accountability. And as you mentioned, the framework, WINGS is actually working on a data charter to try to get a framework for data collection that can be found on our website, and that might be helpful as well. So, and we might have time for one question if anyone would like one, or you can send questions, of course, always to our emails. You all have my personal email, and also to info@wingsweb.org, and you can go to the websites of all the organizations involved here as well, and there will be more information about the initiatives. And to our presenters, do you have any concluding remarks? And
Anna?
Yes?
This is Luc Lapointe calling from Colombia.
Oh, yes?
Yes, do I have time for a quick question?
Oh, sure.
Yes, on the a quick question. And sorry, I missed most of the presentation. The line was up here in Colombia, but I'm currently working with all levels of government here, from the national all the way down to the local government, and looking at the various, I guess, silos that are providing some kind of filling the gaps where ODA left the regions, for example, here in Colombia. So when it comes to concrete and the high-level forums that will take place in Mexico, and looking for governments that might be willing to take the discussion at the local level, I mean, this is one place here where we've actually begin the discussion with, large foundations and small foundations, and looking at the international actors and local and regional actors that are providing some kind of, I guess, feeling some of the needs here. And sometimes it's large philanthropy, sometimes it's small philanthropy, and it's CSR, and it's comes through volunteering. So trying to do a pilot project here in Colombia and getting a lot of interest. So look, how do we come up, once you've got these big goals, these big sustainable post-2015 goals, how do you apply them to the ground so that, you have the tools in place to understand the hyper collective actions that might be taking place. So I don't know if the OECD or with, I know I had a discussion with Katrina at the UN, but with the OECDs and other actors, how do we, currently, as I said, we're getting Colombia very, very interested to bring this down, so it might be an opportunity.
Oh, great. Thank you, Luc. And of course, we can always connect you, OECD, I'm sure. And Mathilde can be talking about that more. But before that,
this is exactly why we're doing this today, so that we can also identify some specific opportunities for follow-up. So let's connect afterwards. But that sounds very exciting.
That's great. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Mathilde. So Delina has a final point.
Yeah, a final point, more flagging up a follow-up opportunity. With the Funders Forum on Sustainable Cities, we are looking at organizing a side event to the World Urban Forum 7, which will be in Medellin at the beginning of April 2014. And the key objective there is to also engage and have conversations with foundations from Latin America, basically also using the opportunity of bringing some of these conversations closer to the ground, but also really learning and getting inspiration from some of the initiatives that are related to the urban sustainability agenda across Latin America. And we're working very closely with the Ford Foundation and Avena Foundation in putting this together. And I know that the colleagues at Avena are reaching out to some foundations in Latin America for that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Delina, and thank you to all our presenters and everyone who joined us today. And as I mentioned earlier, the recording of this webinar will be available on WING's website and our YouTube channel as well. And you can send us as many questions as you like over email, through our website, contact forms on our website. And you can find more information on the initiative mentioned here on the webinar on our website. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for organizing.
Bye. Thank you.